Thanks for joining us today for our talk on the role of the modern intranet and how organizations are powering a new world of work. My name is Ben Skelton. I'm the Vice President of Habanero. I've been with the organization for, how long, Kat? 19 years? Long time.
I think
Every day has been amazing.
You may well be, yes, at 19 years.
Perfect. And you're very, very close to 19 years.
I'm very close to 19 years, and my name's Katerina Sanders, and I'm a senior consultant here at Habanero.
We've worked together forever, since we were children.
Ever since little children.
Awesome. We're on Twitter. You can reach us at Habanero Consult, and we're using the hashtag Modern Intranets. And we'd love to hear your thoughts as we work our way through this webinar.
Totally.
So I thought we'd start with a quick introduction to Habanero. I see a lot of familiar names on the list for this webinar, but for those that aren't familiar with us, we're focused on helping companies become better places to work. Creating great workplaces has been a passion of ours for a very long time. This year, we were ranked number 1 on the Great Place to Work Best Workplaces in Canada list. We've been in the top 10 for the last 8 years and have placed number 1 in the country 3 times. Over the last few years, we've turned our focus outside our organization and have been helping companies across Canada and actually across North America create better employee experiences. So as an organization, you can kind of bucket what we do into 2 different areas. The first is culture and transformation, and really that's about helping organizations evolve and transform. That can be everything from helping you understand what your purpose is, to your vision and your values, to some massive transformation that you need to enact. The second is digital solutions. It's kind of why we're here today. That includes everything from intranets to content and collaboration solutions to websites. And I think one of the things that's always been weird about introducing these as 2 different offerings is because when we think of them, we actually think of them together. It's really hard to generate and change an organization without technology. And it's really hard to have a successful technology solution without ultimately culture and transformation work.
Absolutely. I think of them almost as a continuum.
Totally.
Any project is going to slide a little more to one end, but they're always present in any case.
Exactly. Over the last 17, 18 years, we've built over 200 intranets. We've got 5 of them that have been recognized by Nielsen Norman as top 10 intranet award winners. And so this is a space that we really know well. And super excited to talk about with you today.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to talk about 4 things. We're going to explore what is a modern intranet. It's a kind of buzzy term. You hear it all the time. So we thought we'd spend some time exploring what that actually is. After that, Kat's going to look at supporting a purposeful culture in an organization. And then we're going to do something a little different. Last year's webinar was very much about screenshots and trends and what's happening. And this is a little different because we're going to actually explore an idea we have of where intranets are going and really the next generation of the intranet. So it's a little less a fully fleshed out idea and a little more of exploration. And things we're thinking about right now. And then finally, we're going to get pretty tactical and we're going to give you some tips and advice on how to build a digital workplace plan. So taking those grand ambitions and actually
do something real with them.
Exactly. So what is a modern intranet? Well, when Kat and I were starting this presentation, we decided to take a look back and explore some of our early intranets to really understand how intranets have evolved over the years. And what we found is that there's actually kind of 3 different intranet eras, if you will. And so the first was a large one. It was from 2000, roughly 2000, kind of those first generation intranets, to 2012. And this is a great example of an early generation intranet. It's for BCAA, so the British Columbia Automobile Association in Vancouver or in BC. And you can see here, this is an example, or this is a screenshot of their intranet on-ramp. And so you can see here, it's got a lot of familiar concepts and tools. So you can see at the very top there, you've got the on-ramp logo. If you scroll across the top, you can see there's a people finder, so you can get access to find individuals across the organization, locations and directions, road signs, which is their news, your profile, as well as a link to bca.com. You can see there's a text size switcher, which was really kind of early days in looking at accessibility, and nice to see we've come a long way since then. And then you can see the global navigation in the tabs. So you've got products and services, tools and essentials, our customers, my career, our community, projects and teams, and about BCAA. In that kind of center block there, you've got BCAA road signs. This is a collection of news across the organization. And you can see right now we're on that Our News tab, which is a roll-up of news. But if you want a specific type of news, you could get, for example, travel updates or insurance updates. Below that, you've got an On the Spotlight section. So that's a little feature on an employee. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the Exposed People Finder, so you can easily type in a name and find somebody. And then quick access to various department sites, forms, policies and procedures, and tools and applications. It was interesting when we were going through these intranets because I think I was expecting them to be worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, like when you go to first generation websites.
Oh yeah, they're
right?
embarrassing.
Very,
yeah,
very
and you're
striking.
like, oh my.
Yes.
But
it's not the same with intranets.
no, and interestingly enough, this is where we started to develop a lot of the best practices, the tools, a lot of the concepts that we're still using today were really created in this first intranet era. And I think there's some really important kind of aspects of these first generation intranets. The first was they were really a key employee communication channel. So other than email, this was really the place where you communicated with employees online. The second is they were really large projects. So they tended to be long and they had a really large focus on employee research. And I think that's why a lot of the concepts still hold up today, is they were really generated around the research with employees.
Yeah.
And as we said, really, a lot of these concepts are still very relevant today. What we saw towards the end of the intranet era was really the beginnings of social intranets. This is an example of an intranet we created for ICBC many years ago now, called The Hub. And you can see they're starting to embed a little bit of, I would say, not personalization, but there's a bit of social as well as a bit of figuring out, the elements that matter to me. So you can see there very kind of similar patterns that we saw in the last one, but you've got your navigation at the top, so work tools, projects and team sites, employee essentials, serving customers, how do I, news and events in our company. You've got the news in the center, and you can see here we've got comments on the news. And for a lot of organizations, this was actually a struggle, although it seems not necessarily the most bold thing now. Putting comments on news articles in a lot of organizations where anybody could comment was actually seen as a pretty big deal. And what was really neat about this intranet is on the right there, you can see there's custom toolkits. So in this case, I'm a claims adjuster and I can find the tools that are needed to me, but I can also add additional toolkits as well. So it really started to dip our toes into this personalization. And really, this was where a lot of organizations got to when launching an enterprise social network was seen as too much, too bold. This was really dipping their toes into these social features.
Yes.
So the intranet era had there were some trends in the intranet, or some commonalities in the intranets that were built there. The first is they tended to be long projects. So anywhere from 9 months to 18 months. I think most of them averaged about 12.
Yeah.
They were very expensive. You would do a ton of employee research, you would do a ton of custom development, so they were very, very large, expensive projects. In addition, we developed most of ours on SharePoint, and in order to get SharePoint to kind of create these really beautiful user experiences, you really had to get under the hood and customize it. And so really, these were really heavily customized versions of SharePoint.
Yeah.
And because of that, they were very difficult to upgrade. So organizations that wanted to upgrade to the next version of SharePoint, it was, in a lot of cases, it was actually you build it again.
Yeah, it was a start over.
Start over, you build it again, and then you migrate your content over. And what that really led to is a lot of organizations, it was kind of sad in a way, because you'd built this big, beautiful intranet, spend all this money, and nobody would touch it for 3 or 4 years, and then you'd do the whole thing again. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily a very satisfying era in some ways.
No.
And this is a quote, and this is something we heard a lot of clients say. We spend a ton of time and money on the creation of our intranet. Once it was launched, though, we didn't evolve it in any meaningful way. Part of this is the way projects were funded. They were large capital projects. And so in the best intranets, it was really a content exercise, keeping that content fresh and ensuring that there was a lot of kind of rich things for employees to look at, but we didn't see a lot of enhancements.
No.
So next up was the employee portal era, and it started around 2012. And this was really about giving employees a one-stop shop for everything they needed. So you see here, this is an example from an organization called Goldcorp. They're a mining company based in North and South America. Based in Vancouver, but with mines in North and South America. And this was their portal called Conveyor. And you can see here, Conveyor had a number of different hubs. You can see them at the top. There was a news hub, a safety hub, My Goldcorp, which we're looking at right now, departments and teams, policies and procedures, and sustainability. And so a few things here, you can see the number of notifications, the number of emails, calendar invites, tasks, and then my news feed. And you may wonder, well, why would you show how many emails you have on a portal? But this was a great example of Goldcorp has a big field worker presence. And so some folks don't check their email. It's not a natural thing. If you're not an office worker, for example, if you're in the field, email, you don't have the same relationship with email as we might. And so this allowed them to go to this page and actually see all of those things that were really important to them. And then below that, you can see all of the various things you're following. So all of the department and team sites I'm following, all of those really important documents for me, any applications and workflows, and then various forms and templates that I use all the time. And below that, there's a common actions area. So you can see I can do everything from book a leave request to manage your goals to submitting your expenses. And what's really neat is those common actions really abstract you from the systems behind the scenes. So I don't actually have to know something's in SAP or another system. I just have to know I'm going to submit my expenses, and the portal will actually take care of getting me into the right tool. So a few things about the employee portal era. The first is it was really about creating that one-stop shop for employees. That was seen as the most important thing. A lot of them had a lot of integration with workflow and forms, and so you could really trigger a lot of processes and manage them from that portal experience. They also had, as you can see here, deep connections with content and collaboration sites, so you can get to those places you need to actually get work done. And many of them also allowed employees to personalize their preferences. So it was a really exciting era and an exciting time because it was really that next generation of intranet that could do so much more for employees. But they had a dark side.
Got even bigger.
Bigger, yeah. They were even longer projects. So on average, they were about 18 months. They were even more expensive and even more heavily customized versions of SharePoint, which made them very difficult to upgrade. And for the most part, we didn't actually see a lot of clients be able to actually achieve what they wanted in this area.
No.
I think Goldcorp was an example of an organization that really pushed it, was really innovative.
Yeah.
But for a lot of organizations, when they looked at these employee portals, they said, things like, well, oh my goodness, we're going to have to integrate all of these various tools and solutions, and it's just too much work. And so
it's a huge commitment to one direction.
Exactly. So I think very few organizations were really successful in this era, but Goldcorp was a really great example. And so, this is kind of really illustrated by this quote. Integration with our line of business systems has been too challenging and expensive to achieve everything on our roadmap. Yeah. So we found a lot of clients really kind of stall out on this vision of the one-stop shop for everything an employee needs.
Totally.
In about 2016, we started to see the modern intranet era come to life. And really, the modern intranet builds on everything that's come before, but there's several new capabilities that modern intranets really enable in organizations. Here's an example of a modern intranet. This is one that we created for the GTAA. So they manage Toronto Pearson, Canada's largest airport, and this is an intranet for their employees. So a few things you can see. First off, in this intranet, it's built on top of Office 365 and SharePoint Online. So it lives in the cloud, which means it's a lot easier for employees to access it. It's constantly getting updates as Microsoft updates SharePoint Online and Office 365. You can't see it in this mock-up, but one of the things that's really great is that it's fully responsive for mobile use. So you can imagine in an airport, not everybody works behind a desk. There's people all over the place. So having access to the portal from wherever you are on your mobile device is a huge win. In addition, I don't think as organizations we did enough around accessibility and for people who use assisted devices to access these digital tools. And so what's really great about the modern intranet era is there's this really big push on accessibility. And it's not just about, we're compliant, but actually creating good experiences for people who have accessibility challenges or accessibility needs. In addition, they really integrate social and content and collaboration tools in a more meaningful way. So a great example is the integration of Yammer on your network. So the comments on news articles, that's actually integrated with Yammer commenting, and you cross-post news in both channels, so people are more likely to see it. So kind of exploring this experience here, you can see there's search in the top left. You've got My Links, so those are customized links that if you're on a computer in another zone or another office, for example, or a kiosk, you've got all your links right there. Concepts that we've seen time and time again, like the People Finder. A glossary, I don't know about you, but most organizations we go into, when we talk to new employees, they say things like, oh my goodness, there's so many acronyms here. And so having a glossary where you can explore those is really good. And then preferences, so allowing people to choose what kind of news I want to see, what kind of events are important to me. So all of these various components. From a navigation perspective here, you can see a really kind of clean navigation that uses a lot of those concepts that we saw in the past. And you can see here we've got this, this modern intranet experience with lots of photography, really kind of rich, beautiful imagery. And so we can see here we've got 3 kind of promoted stories, and then we've got our news items that appear below. So the modern intranet was really exciting for a few reasons. The first is the projects were a lot shorter. Because you typically build your modern intranet on a tool or a platform like Office 365 and leverage things like intranet accelerators, you can usually get the projects done within 4 months, which is really exciting. Another one, which I mentioned before, but it's really worth pointing out, is they should always be up to date with a regular cadence of releases or updates. So you're always getting the latest and greatest. And we're kind of used to that now. You go into Office 365 and, every time you open up Word every month, there's like, hey, there's a new feature here for you to check out. And so it's a super exciting time. And the modern intranet really takes advantage of that. So as we develop new features and functionalities for intranets, well, it's great that more and more clients can take advantage of that. In addition, we've learned ultimately at the end of the day, the thing that's going to make an intranet great or bad actually has nothing to do with the features and functionality on it, as much as really fresh, rich content that's really interesting, that's accurate, that's timely. And so modern intranets often include tools for content authors to help them keep their content fresh and make sure they're reviewing it on a regular basis so that content is really exceptional. There's many ways that you can create a modern intranet. There's many intranets in a box. Habanero has our own kind of philosophy on that. We don't actually believe in the intranet in a box model as much as ultimately allowing organizations to leverage all of those things that have been created to date, but to do it in a way that's a little more bespoke, I would say, with a better experience. So we've got our Go Intranet Accelerator. Of course, it's got all those intranet essentials that you see in those out-of-the-box products, But it has two kind of interesting differentiators. The first is a design system, which allows us to create custom, beautiful intranets that really reflect an organization's brand. So that Pearson portal that you saw before, that's a great example of reflecting the brand of the organization in a really beautiful way. And the second is a developer platform. And that allows us to create custom components and features. So a good example for Pearson was they have a shuttle between their admin building and the terminal. And so that wasn't, obviously we didn't have a shuttle widget in our intranet essentials, but because we had a developer platform, we could build that custom component in their intranet. So it's a little bit of best of both worlds. And I would say the most important component in any intranet project actually isn't about the technology. As we know, it's about research, it's about experience design. So actually understanding employees, it's about governance, measurement, coaching, and support. And so as you're looking at a modern intranet, you want to make sure that all of those things aren't left out, because they're so important in creating a really great intranet experience. And I think it's probably pretty obvious, but when you're building an intranet, don't think of it as a technology project. It's ultimately an investment in your culture. And that's what Kat's going to talk about now. So over to you, Kat.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, no, that is absolutely the case that we've discovered in our many years of doing this, is that it's all about the culture element, and it's not just a technology discussion. And so let's explore this idea of intranet and culture, and specifically a purposeful culture. Basically, when we talk about a purposeful culture, we're using the word purposeful in two ways. So in the first case, it's about having a culture that ties to your organization's purpose and values. It's about getting really clear on why you do what you do, what's the meaning and importance. But then the other way that we like to think about purposeful is that you're being very deliberate in your approach to company culture, because culture can just happen, but it doesn't have to just happen. And a lot of leaders are now moving very much towards a more planned view of their company culture. And why then does this purposeful culture even matter? Well, I mean, to your organization, it's what supports your strategic goals. It's what reflects the kind of company that you are and the kind of company that you want to be. But maybe more importantly, purposeful cultures are very important to employees. It gives employees a chance to feel that their work has meaning, that they can be engaged by what they do. It inspires, it energizes, and practically speaking, if your culture is really deliberate and explicit and spelled out, it allows employees to better align their efforts with moving that organization forward in the desired direction. Just to maybe throw some data at this, and I think a lot of organizations have made this leap now, but here's some research from Gallup talking about the importance of having engaged employees. So 1/3 of global employees strongly agree with the statement, "The mission and purpose of my organization makes me feel my job is important." And when you can move that, rather than 1/3, but 80% of your employees can agree with that statement, what's been found is business units realize 51% reduction in absenteeism, a 64% drop in safety incidents, and 29% improvement in quality. Towers Perrin also published some data in which they found that businesses with highly engaged employees saw a 19% increase in their earnings per share, whereas those with the least engaged employees saw a 33% decrease in their earnings per share. And then just to come back one more time to Gallup, engaged and motivated employees are 21% more productive than disengaged employees. So there's a lot of research out there to support moving towards purposeful culture is a smart thing for your business. And so what does this have to do with modern intranets? Just as Ben mentioned before, when intranets first started, everybody was realizing what an important communication channel they were for them. And that has definitely not changed. And if anything, it's become absolutely written in stone that this is how you can tie your employees to what your organization is doing. So your digital workplace, your intranet is a critical channel because culture needs to be shared. It's pervasive, so it needs a way to make its way throughout the organization, but it can often be implicit. And so when you really embrace this idea within your intranet, you can take the implicit and make it explicit, which is ultimately going to make it more powerful. And so how can you reinforce purpose with digital tools? Well, I mean, the most obvious is that increased connection of people to one another and allowing them to collaborate more smoothly and easily. Related to that is the sharing and storage of knowledge so that you don't have quite so much that's tied up in one individual's head, and it can start to move its way throughout the organization more. And especially that's where I think companies are loving what social intranets can do for them, because it's not as formal as sort of traditional knowledge management, but instead you get that fantastic just serendipity of conversations that spring up that everybody can pile into and learn from.
So many organizations we're working with right now, one of the biggest things they're trying to do is break down silos.
Exactly.
We hear it, time and time again. We've got to get rid of our silos, and so
yes.
Yeah,
it's shifted a teeny bit. It used to be everyone was panicked because the baby boomers were retiring. They're like, oh my God, they know everything. We can't let them out the door.
Thank you, global economy collapse.
Exactly. Now there's some of that, although people are feeling more comfortable with it.
You're going to work forever now.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody can afford to retire, so nobody's leaving. But it's absolutely about the silos, or even just with so many more organizations being globally dispersed, and recognizing that they need to make sure that someone who's working in Shanghai can feel connected to someone who's in LA, to someone who's in Sao Paulo.
Totally.
And then the last few points to this reinforcing purpose then is definitely it's around surfacing successes and recognizing desirable behaviors. And
just don't call it that on your intranet.
Definitely.
Desirable behaviors. That's the section.
Yes, and people get like a little desirable behavior award.
Badge? Yeah, no.
But it is about creating tangible and inspiring examples of your company purpose brought to life, and that really both the person who does it feels that recognition, and the people who observe it learn from that and say, oh, so this is cool. This is what it means to work here.
I think a lot of organizations too, like that in the spotlight example from the previous, like the original intranet era, that's a great example. But more and more from a modern perspective, it's about employees recognizing each other.
Definitely.
And showing, hey, look at what this person did that reflects our values.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily a top-down thing as much as a bit of a groundswell around,
Yep.
understanding and living the purpose and vision and values.
For sure, and it's also, I think, shifted from there being a heavy reliance on things like in the spotlight boxes, if you will. It's moved through to people having recognition modules that they built into their intranets, to now it's that plus, again, it's social.
Yeah.
And it's that spontaneous and authentic. The others are authentic. This feels to employees more authentic when it's just a more random content like that. And then the last thing is increasing exposure to culture by providing content where, when, and how people want it. So this is speaking to this idea of mobile device support, and everyone recognizing that work doesn't start and stop anymore as a 9 to 5.
You're working all the time.
You're working all the time. You never shut it off, but you can enjoy it with some of what we just discussed. Like, people are seeking this information out on their commutes because they're as happy to get updated on what's happening during that time as they are to be checking out the latest of
on the bus, not when they're driving.
Not when they're driving. We don't recommend that. That would be unsafe. Okay, a few more ideas about reinforcing purpose is that with digital tools, you can also have this culture support be self-sustaining, where you create a tipping point that your intranet is so steeped in culture and it's not forced, and people will add to it with that spontaneity that I was talking about earlier. And so now you have this lovely virtuous circle that it just needs a little bit of nourishing, but it's not all pushing water uphill. You also can collect so much data now with regards to the usage and interest of your content in your intranets that you can mine it, analyze it, and evolve your efforts to make sure that you're always evolving and pushing in the directions that are most valuable. And you can, of course, use your intranet to reinforce purpose very specifically by actually having the content on your site that speaks to events and moments and letting people know here's what we're doing in a way that's not hard to find. That is a lot of theory around culture and intranets, and I think we've got a really great example of something that we recently built for a client that sort of shows it all in real life.
Thanks, Kat. So we're going to talk about Barton Mallow. Barton Mallow is a construction company based in Michigan. And when you think of construction, you don't necessarily, the first thing that comes to mind isn't generally innovation. I think Barton Mallow is so exciting because the amount of innovation they're doing and what they're doing as an organization is pretty groundbreaking. They've got some
groundbreaking.
Look at that.
That's a good one.
They've got some pretty incredible goals. So they want to double efficiency by 2024. Of course, doing that in a safe, responsible way. They want to empower their people's collaboration and innovation. Mobile access is really important as they've got this cross North America workforce. They want to make sure that they have access to the tools wherever they are. So this is an example of the homepage of their intranet. So their intranet is called Dirt. It's actually built on our Go platform, and I kind of love that because in construction, everything really starts with dirt. And this is their homepage, and it's really all about connecting people to news, to corporate metrics and photos. And we really wanted employees to think, I feel connected to my company. I know what's going on. There's so much stuff that we're doing. And I actually understand how we're going to achieve these goals we've set up. As we scroll down the page, you can see there's events. And there's also an integration with Yammer. And I think this is really important because this is all about relationship building and story sharing. So for example, there's a story of curing concrete using inflatable pools. That's a great example of innovation leading to more efficiency. And Yammer is the place where teams can share that and learn about, oh wow, that's a really neat way of doing something that's allowing us to be more efficient.
And because it's Yammer, it means that those stories can be told in the moment by the people who are involved in it. It's not something that now has to go into like a workflow process that will get to the content
Corporate
author.
communications then has to reach out to the people and
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And the nice thing about Yammer obviously is it's mobile enabled, so you can even take a picture at the site, show people what they're doing, they can comment. So it's just it's a really great way to make sure employees feel empowered to connect and share.
Totally.
As we scroll down below, you can see metrics. And below that, there's a photo gallery. And we think of photo galleries as such an important part of any intranet. You can see here there's really a space dedicated to sharing Barton Mallow's successes and building pride in the work employees do. So there's concrete examples of, wow, look at these amazing projects we're building, as well, look at what our team is doing and the recognition they're getting for doing such an amazing job. So Barton Mallow, I think, is a great example of using an intranet to really help propel a culture, if you will.
Totally.
Here's an example of the People Finder, and this is a really core component of an intranet, is allowing people to find people. So you can see here, this is Dana, the Senior Director of Marketing. You've got here all of Dana's information, and some of it may seem a little strange, like why would you show an address in a People Finder, for example? Well, one of the reasons is you could be on a construction site somewhere else. And in a lot of organizations, if you've got hundreds of construction sites, finding where that individual is as you're driving or as you're pulled over on the side of the road looking at the intranet, but you may want to find that. And so allowing the flexibility to customize things like a People Finder to show you the information that actually matters to employees is really important. So you can see here, I can see things like Dana's title, the group she works in, but more importantly, I can see the location that she's at. So I can go to that. If she was on site, I could go and see her on site. The next is the knowledge and tools area. And so to help people navigate to the training material they need and to work following a kind of one company approach, we created this knowledge and tools area. And it really houses standard practices and those just-in-time training tools, while providing a direct link to the learning management tool as well. And what I really like is that you can see here at the bottom, you've got 3 ways into information. So you can browse by topic, you can browse by type, or you can browse by system. So maybe I know I want SAP information, for example, or maybe I want information on closeout, that topic. And so it's a really easy way to get into the resources that you need, those kind of knowledge and tools. We've been doing this webinar, well, it was a presentation originally, and we were doing it in different cities. And one of the questions that we got from somebody in the audience was, well, why would you have all these links, and why would you have this busy page?
That's why Google works.
Yeah, why wouldn't you just have a big search box? And it's an amazing question, because I think in all of our research, we spend time understanding employees. And if you really look at and understand various types of employees, a search box is really powerful for somebody who knows exactly what they're looking for.
Yes.
But if I'm new to an organization, I may not know it's even closed out. It's called the closeout report. I may not know what's available to me. So that's why you always want to allow, search is really important, something that you want to be really powerful and tuned, and you always want to be making search better and better. But you also want to be able to allow people to explore by topic or by type or by category, to allow them to get where they need to go when they may not know what tools are actually available to them. And finally, People Essentials is always such a important, it's really the backbone of any intranet. And this is one of the things I love about DIRT and what Barton Mallow did. They spent so much time on content, creating really, really incredible content. And it goes back to when we're talking about modern intranets and how important great content is. I just love this example. So this is for new employees. Hey, you got the job. Congratulations. Now dig into your new hire checklist and see how you can get up to speed.
Yeah.
I love this. This isn't a culture where I'm going to be coddled. Like this is like, let's get to it. Let's get up to speed. Let's get working. And
we're going to give you the tools to do it.
Exactly.
But know that this is on you.
Yeah. I love it. I love the fact that the writing actually gives you a sense of the culture.
Yeah.
Is so
It's been
incredible.
written with a voice and a tone. Somebody took the time to do that.
And I love that. I think it's so powerful. Here's an example of a news article on DIRT. And I think this is a great example of creating content that people get excited about. So you can see here, this is a news article, really rich, great imagery, and a fantastic title. So using innovation as shark bait. Inside room 109 at the HQ's hub, 24 innovators sat both on chairs and on speakerphone for other regions to get a breakdown of Barton Mallow's upcoming internal Shark Tank competition. I love this for a few reasons. The one is it doesn't read like, it's engaging, it's unique.
It's not boring corporate speak.
Yeah, it's not boring corporate speak. I also like the sensitivity to people that may not be at headquarters. We often see that in really distributed organizations, that sometimes you get this us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
And so I really love how purposeful they're being with the words that they're writing. So they're actually being sensitive for those that, aren't actually in the state. They may be somewhere else in North America. And so I think this is somewhere where Barton Mallow just really excels, is creating rich, engaging content on DIRT. Perfect. So now we'll shift gears a bit and talk a little bit about future digital workplace experiences and what we're seeing in organizations and where we believe intranets are really going. So when you look at a digital workplace, they often look like this. So you've got your intranet, you've got Yammer, you've got Teams. A lot of organizations have a ton of knowledge bases. In some cases, they're policy and procedure libraries. In others, they're things like we've got a customer service organization. And in some ways, it's almost like another intranet. It's a knowledge base for them as they're helping customers. And then a ton of other tools. So a vast majority of our clients are using tools like ServiceNow or Nintex. Organizations are starting to really experiment with things like Power Apps and Flow. And then, of course, those big enterprise systems like SAP and Workday. And so when we think of the digital workplace, it's really made up of, it's not just about your intranet, it's about all of these various tools.
Yes.
So When we think of digital workplace, people often ask, what is that? I kind of understand that it's a collection of the tools, but it's a really buzzy topic right now. It's something that you hear a lot. And so there are some fundamentals for what we think of as a modern digital workplace. The first is anywhere, anytime, any device access. So no matter where I am, I can get access to the tools that I need. And so no more VPN, no more of that nonsense. Of course, security is really important. And so making sure you have things like two-factor authentication and pieces like that set up are obviously really important to get in place for this kind of vision to come to life.
Well, and things have swung from control and shutting things down and putting them behind barriers to let's just make it safe for people to access what they need.
Exactly. The second is obviously it's a collection of the digital tools you need to do your work. A big part of a digital workplace is really fostering collaboration and communication and building connections to people as you do that, which is very important. And then finally, what we're seeing in a lot of organizations as they kind of embrace this digital workplace journey is as you start to have this collection of tools, how do you find information?
Yes.
Your intranet can be part of that. It can get you into the right systems and content, but comprehensive search is another area that we see being really important as companies start to build out this digital workplace vision. So when we look at a digital workplace, obviously we've spent a lot of time talking about intranets. The next thing I just wanted to touch on briefly is Yammer, because we talked a little bit about it in the Barton Mallow example. But I think Yammer is so important in actually driving culture in organizations. It's a very powerful tool if you use it appropriately. So for those that don't know Yammer, it's really about allowing employees to have open conversations and share their thoughts. It allows colleagues to connect with each other and allows you to really discover people and ideas. And I love it as a way to learn and connect when you have downtime. So when your employees are waiting in line in the cafeteria, or they're on that shuttle bus, or they've just got that little bit of downtime at their desk, it's kind of funny. Instead of checking Facebook, well, they can check Yammer. And that's great from an organizational perspective that they're taking that discretionary time and actually learning about the people and the culture. This is kind of a neat example here. This is from our Yammer network, and I think we've got an incredibly thriving Yammer network.
Round 2 of it.
Round 2.
Because the first time
it died at the beginning.
We did not do a good job of launching it, and we learned a lot from that.
I remember one of our developers said, "This is stupid, I'm not using it," and then nobody else used it. It was like, he
dropped the mic.
Yeah, he dropped the mic and Yammer was done.
Yep.
And we tried it again.
And we learned from that failure, and then it took off like gangbusters.
Yeah. And we've actually learned a lot just deploying Yammer in enterprise networks. On our website. If you go there, there's a long kind of insights post on, 10 considerations for launching Yammer, launching a Yammer network. So if you're interested in that, check it out. But I think if you failed in the past, it doesn't mean that you're going to fail in the future.
That's right. It's a bit more of a change management exercise because people end up with this bad taste in their mouth.
Totally.
But you can get over it.
You just rename it from Yammer to Hammer. Just call it Hammer. This is a great example of, and I love this, so Ashley, who's our employee experience coordinator, she posted an article on our intranet called Living Our Values, and it was the July series. And what's neat is when she posts on our intranet, it also creates a post on Yammer. And then what it will do is the comments on Yammer are connected to the post on the intranet. So you have one integrated comment stream, no matter if somebody's on Yammer or somebody's on the intranet. And I've got a dark secret. I don't go to our intranet all that much. And what's really interesting is because these articles appear on Yammer, it actually advertises the intranet for me. And so I'll often click on the article, not because I go to the intranet, but because I go to Yammer all the time and then discover it. And I think this is a really good example of when you look at that digital workplace, building connections between the tools. If I need a template, if I need something like that, of course I'll go to the intranet, but Yammer's the place I go to multiple times a day. So it's a really neat way to explore and discover intranet content. And you can see here, So Ashley posted this article. We're about 50 people. So you can see here she's got 12, 13, 14, 15 likes, which is pretty good. This has been seen by 22 people. And you can see here, so Stephen, our president, on his iPhone, so maybe he was waiting in line somewhere, writes, "Way to stand your ground, Mallory O'Connor and Kat Sanders." Kind of funny. I can only imagine what the three I'm glad it's
very innocuous.
I'm glad it hid those 3 previous replies, because I'm sure there's some juicy stuff in there. And then Kat posts this story, and she said, "What jumps to mind on the tell the truth value goes back to my very early days here a long time ago. No TDLs required. At our first Open Books meetings, Open Books was BSR. It focused just on financials." And what I love about this is we're talking about our values, and it gives people a forum to share, this is how we're living our values. Kat's sharing a story from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, long time ago. But what's neat is new employees are seeing this, and they can actually understand how we built up transparency in our organization.
Yes.
And so it's a bit of that storytelling. So I think this is a great example of how Yammer can really, really help you build your culture.
Totally.
When we presented this talk in person, we'd ask people, how many of you remember the MySite, the SharePoint MySite? And people put up their hands kind of sheepishly. And we would say, how many of you had a successful MySite?
All the hands went down.
I don't think anybody actually put up their hands. And people were like, oh, we tried. And a lot of people went through that where you were like, oh, we're going to have this MySite, and people are going to put their skills in there and keep it up to date. And of course, your executives never did it. So employees are like, well, that's stupid. I'm not doing that. Yep. And so really only your intranet manager often created their MySite and maybe 5 other keeners in the organization. Exactly. There are a couple places where we saw it work, but
it took a tremendous amount of effort to make it work.
Yeah, and most people didn't keep it up to date.
No.
And what I love is I kind of think of Yammer bringing to life what the MySite was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So the MySite was trying to achieve this idea of I can find experts in the organization or people who know something about this. The great thing is in Yammer, if people are posting about what they're passionate about, if they're helping people solve problems, if they're sharing ideas, it's just such a richer way of actually solving that problem of finding experts in the organization than the MySite. And so I really think from a Yammer perspective that it can do so much more than that's just a place for conversations. Yeah. It can actually help people find expertise across the organization.
Absolutely.
And build those connections.
Yeah, we see that all the time with our own network.
So next up is Teams. And Teams is really that place for your focused work. It's used to communicate with your specific working teams and groups. So unlike Yammer, which is really about discovery and collisions and all of those pieces, Teams is really about, this is a team I work on, let's share, let's collaborate, let's get work done. And it's fantastic for secure documents and conversations. And to be honest, I've been really surprised with the momentum Teams has in our client organizations. Clients are adopting it at a rapid pace, and it really brings together all of the things teams need to collaborate. What I love is this is an example of my teams here at Habanero. And what was hilarious is
I've been doctored.
It's a doctored screenshot because on the left-hand side, like a lot of even the names of my teams
sensitive
were super confidential. The information in it was really confidential as well. And that just showed me how much real work is getting done in Teams, because these are things that I can't share with people. Like it's ultimately where we're doing kind of our most strategic, highly sensitive work versus Yammer, which is really about those open conversations. And then finally, knowledge bases. We talked about this a little bit, but knowledge bases are often used by your frontline employees. They can contain things like product details, procedures, and system information. And we've got a lot of organizations that have big customer service groups or teams. Often these can actually even act as an intranet for those teams. So for our customer service organization, here's a knowledge base, but it also includes things like recognition and news and everything that customer service agents need to do their job. And so I think the key is really recognizing that In some organizations, your digital workplace, you might actually have multiple intranets in a way, or intranet-like capabilities. And then, of course, you've got all of your various tools, your back-end line of business systems. These are, every organization is different, but there's some commonalities that we see between them. And what's really exciting to us is how many of these solutions now were either born in the cloud, so things like Salesforce and Workday and ServiceNow, or are moving to the cloud. So many organizations are even moving SAP into the cloud. And although a move to the cloud itself isn't that exciting, what we're really excited about is a lot of these organizations and a lot of these tools as they move to the cloud are allowing for more open APIs that you can access. There's tools like MuleSoft that actually stitch together these services and allow you to access these line of business systems in a more meaningful way. And this is really what's generating this kind of idea that we have of where intranets are going. If you remember, when we talked about the employee portal era, one of the challenges was actually the vision was really solid.
Exactly. The promise was there.
Yeah, it was just really hard to do. And so we actually think that, this example of the My Goal Corp, the dashboard, once you start to be able to integrate these back-end systems in a more meaningful way, we actually think that this is going to be the next generation of the modern intranet, where you've really got your dashboard. So it's stuff that's meaningful to me. I can get work done. I've got integrations with SAP or my content and collaboration sites or my workflow tool or ServiceNow. And so the idea is, it's really, I do still have the news hub where I get all of that great purpose-led news, but there will be a dashboard that's all about me and the work I have to get done in the organization. And so we really think of this as the next, I don't want to say the next era, but really where modern intranets are going.
So everything that we've covered so far has really been pretty heavy on the kind of theory and concept. And we wanted to close our session today with giving you some actual tools and tangible things that you can use in order to bring your modern intranet that much further along. And so I'm going to walk through what it is to build out a digital workplace plan. Basically, you can think of it in 4 basic phases. Not the best title ever, but planning for your plan.
Yes. Sounds like fun.
Right? Then you need to understand your current experience. You're going to have to convey that current experience because people need to understand where things are at so that they can make informed decisions on where to move as you envision your future. So I'm going to just go into each one of those in a little more detail. So plan for your plan. It's great to have some things in place ahead of digging into your digital workplace plan in earnest. So I know it sounds it's like a phase 0, which is painful because you just want to get
phase.
Yeah, everybody just wants to get going, but phase 0 is very important. And where we recommend you start is in governance. So governance covers the people and processes that are going to enable your digital workplace to do what you need it to do. And no one ever wants to tackle governance. It's not a topic that inspires a lot of excitement or energy because it's hard, because this is where you need to have the conversations of who's going to do what are the roles, what are the responsibilities. But this is really where you need to start before you get into any of your initiatives, because this is where your strategy and vision and goals is eventually going to come from. So we look at governance 4 areas. So strategy is where your vision and direction is going to come from. Operations is your day-to-day. Your systems is obviously the technology that's driving all of this. And then support is where your education and evangelism is going to come from.
I love that too, because when a lot of people think of support, they don't think of...
They think help desk.
Yeah.
And that's definitely, it's got to be much more than that.
Yeah.
Support is what will continue to keep your intranet or your digital workplace thriving, because that's where the learning happens that can then feed into the evolution of these tools. So support is often overlooked, but very important. All right, so we've had clients who've asked us kind of who does what when it comes to governance. And so this is a model that we like to use to explain it. So first, you've got your executive sponsor or sponsors. Then you've got your steering committee. And then you've got your operational team. So let's talk about the executive sponsor. So this is where approval and endorsement comes from. This individual, or maybe you've got two sponsors, that's not uncommon. This is providing overall strategic direction, making sure your digital workplace fits into the grand scheme of business strategy. It's where you can raise the awareness of the digital workplace at a senior management level. It's what makes sure that the workplace is managed strategically and holistically, and it's not just scattered. And of course, it's where budget comes from.
Yay, money.
Yay, money. The steering committee, they govern and they guide, and they own the mandate and vision for this digital workplace. And this is going to be a cross-functional team. This is where you want to, at a minimum, for a digital workplace, you want to have IT at the table, you want to have communications at the table, and you want to have HR at the table, actually, for the voice of the strongest voice of the employee that you can have. There may be other functions.
Operations is
even to some extent finance. Yep. So this is very much up to how your company is structured, and
invite everybody.
Just bring. It's a big party. So the steering committee is this is the group that ensures alignment with business objectives. They oversee the projects and enhancements. I'll talk about this later, but if there is a roadmap that you're following, it's the steering committee that's going to be making sure that how that roadmap is rolling out is what the business needs. And the steering committee provides guidance to the operational team. The operational team, these are the doers. They manage and they deliver, and they're the ones who look at the administration of the various tools. They're also very heavily involved in the communication with end users and stakeholders. They help implement the prioritized projects, and they monitor the usage and adoption. And so, for instance, somebody like an intranet manager is going to both be on the operational team and the steering committee, because you do need some of those bridge individuals who can speak to both. Let's talk about the data for a second. Let's say you're moving into your digital transformation, possibly, or you're just continuing with your digital transformation. You've got your governance in place. Also, take a minute before you really get into things to take stock of your data that you can pull to understand the different digital workplace tools that you have and what they're doing, when, how. The more you know going into any of this, the better it is. So take a moment. So some data sources that you could look at are, for instance, engagement surveys, or really any kind of survey that you may have had around collaboration, tools, IT systems. Most engagement surveys, though, do have a section talking about tools where you'll get some really great information of how what you're doing right now is meeting people's needs.
It's interesting how many organizations we're working with that their engagement surveys talk about a dissatisfaction with digital tools, and this has become a bit of a hot button issue with many of our clients around we need to get people better tooling, because this is starting to create, it's always created friction, but employees are starting to get, let's say, a little fed up.
They are, yeah. We're seeing organizations where employees have moved through the frustration phase, and now they're in anger.
The anger phase, my favorite.
I'd like to live there as much as possible. It is definitely a hot button, and this is also where you start to see this whole shadow IT, which some organizations have just decided to embrace. But do that, but do it in an informed way. Another data source is just if you look at the individual tools, they're probably going to have some analytics baked in, so you should have a look at those. And definitely go back to previous initiatives. So much effort goes into anything, especially anything technology driven, and all of that material that's collected then just kind of collects dust, and it's a waste. So if you can, go back to your previous initiatives and get some insights from that. So that's you planning for the plan. Next, let's talk about understanding and conveying your current experience. I think first and foremost, you don't have to guess.
Don't guess.
Don't guess. But you know what? There's also, don't fall into, I know, because I work with this all day, every day. I don't need to talk to end users because I'm so...
That's wrong. That's bad.
Well, you miss out. Yeah. We all have biases. We all make assumptions. And by doing research, you can cut through all of that and get super grounded in the facts. So one of the tools that we like to use is an empathy map. And this is inspired by Dave Gray's empathy map. This is something that I sketched that I know you're
It's beautiful.
all...
You
Thank
did a great job.
Thanks. I'm very proud
I'm
of it.
very impressed.
Right? Clearly I did not miss my calling as an artist. But I wanted to show this version of it to further highlight the fact that we're not talking about expensive, difficult things to do. This is just about getting curious about what is happening in the day-to-day experience. And so a tool like this, you get a focus group together and you start to work through and you get people to fill this out for themselves. So under think and feel, just, what is that matters to them? What are their major worries and possibly aspirations? What are they seeing around them? What's the environment like? What are they saying and doing? So what behaviors are they acting out to express their beliefs? And then hearing, what are they hearing around them and who is influencing them? So this is a very straightforward thing. You can use an empathy map like this to understand end users, teammates, collaborators, and it's all about identifying gaps and challenges with the current experience.
I love, like, often you'll bring a team together, you'll try to fill it out, and then you'll actually bring in the real members of the audience group, and it's really interesting. We did one with a CEO once, and so we had all of these ideas of what a CEO cared about and what was really important to them and what they were seeing. The CEO came in and go, "This is not me at all.
Yes.
This is totally wrong." And so he actually filled out the empathy map for us, and it was a really neat, going back to your example of not guessing and not making this up. You, as much as possible, these are really useful tools of getting in front of your true audience groups.
Absolutely, and there are times where that just isn't feasible. So there's definitely the something is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But as much as you can use tools like this with the people themselves, the better. So what are some other research options? Well, interviews, obviously, different sorts of workshops that don't necessarily involve empathy maps, and you can also use listening labs. And listening labs is something that we really love when it comes to digital workplace, because what a listening lab is you sit down and you observe someone working in the environment in which they normally work. So
not in a creepy way.
Not in a creepy way, in a nice way, in a supportive and empathetic way. So if you're working with somebody, if you're observing someone who's, let's say, customer frontline, you want them at their workstation. You want to see them with their headset on, maybe even in an actual call. What are they going to? What is it that they're using in order to have that moment with the customer? It's where we get great examples of, we see people with, the sticky notes that are all over the place because they can't find what they need when they need it.
Even the friction in their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely, the tension, the stress, people with big printed out binders of things that are out of date, but it's the only way they can get the information. We also love, it's not a listening lab, per se when we're out in the field. There's no lab to it, but we are there watching people, working, be it a construction site, be it a rail yard, whatever it is, and that's helping us really come back and understand how they're using their devices or how they're not interacting with digital workplace tools whatsoever because it just doesn't fit the environment that they're in. And now we've observed it, we can bring that information back and see what can we do to change this and make it useful. So a mix of those three is probably best. This here is a journey map. And this particular one we did this in a workshop, and we had the people in the workshop fill out their own journey maps. And in this case, it was for a very small journey. It was trying to find a particular document that they needed. And you can see that you capture sort of the action and the feeling and the thinking that goes along with that.
Look at those feelings.
They're not happy feelings.
Ready for a struggle. That's how I start my day.
So sad. So we want to turn those frowns upside down. And the only way we can really do that is to hear it kind of in their words. So a journey map is great. It captures highs, lows, things that are working, things that are not, and you're doing it in a visual and engaging way. And so you end up with these really great artifacts that you can then use when you're kind of reporting back on what you saw and heard. A journey map, you can play around with the granularity. So you can either dive into very small micro interactions, or you can take something more end-to-end, like what's it like using our learning management system, and that's entirely up to you.
Or what's onboarding like in our organization as a new employee? It's another.
Exactly. So this is also a very powerful tool that can be used in a variety of ways.
I also love how ugly this is, and I say that in the nicest way. Like
it doesn't have to be polished to be powerful.
You often in the world see these beautiful journey maps, and so I think people are a little afraid of them, but ultimately it's not about this beautiful end produced journey map. It's about getting in front of these employees, about actually understanding their day-to-day lives and having them really kind of craft this for you, as opposed to,
then sanitizing it. Yes, for sure. And I mean, in fairness, a lot of those beautiful ones are for future journeys, the aspired to journey. But definitely when it comes to just for collecting information, keep it
ugly.
Keep it real. Keep it real. So you go and you collect all of this information. You've got all this data. Cannot stress enough the importance that you leave yourself time to actually go through all that information that you've collected, because so often people, they do all the scheduling, they have all their workshops, they do all their interviews, and there hasn't been enough time left to really get into the meat of it, which means you've done all that effort and you're just going to do something very superficial.
1 week of research, that's all you get. Or analysis.
Yeah, of analysis.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've heard formulas like 10 to 1. So for all the time you spend on research, you should do 10 times as much analysis. That's just not realistic.
It's too much analysis.
It is. So I wouldn't go that far, but definitely give yourself at least, if you do a research phase that gets you, let's say, a handful of interviews, a handful of workshops, and a few extra things, give yourself at least 1 to 2 weeks after that so that you and the team can really sift. The danger if you do this too superficially is that you're not actually going to be using the data. You're going to be relying heavily on your own memories and reactions and biases, which means it's almost like you haven't done the research, right? So leave yourself time to do that. We also have really started to get excited about if you do the research activities I just said, that gives you a lot of qualitative data. You can then do quantitative analysis of that qualitative data, which is very, very powerful. Okay, now you need to convey everything that you've learned. And really this is where we would say it's about the storytelling. So do not just create a report. You can use raw or cleaned up versions of your empathy maps and journey maps. You can present quotes and pictures from your workshops and listening labs. One quick thing is going into this, have a sense of how you're going to treat anonymity. If you're going to tell people when you're doing these workshops, look, what you say in this room stays in this room, honor that and know it, so that afterwards, if there's maybe contentious things that come out of it, you could get pressure from certain parts of the organization to say, well, where did you hear that from and from whom? So just understand going into it where you are going to put yourself on that anonymity scale, and stick with that.
When I'm working on these projects, I tend to I think it's nice to let people know that we're not going to share your name with any of this information.
Yes.
Because it allows them to actually be more forthright and honest and I find that the interviews themselves or the listening labs are much richer. And so that's something that I think is really important.
I think it is too.
And sometimes clients will say, who said that? And I'm like, it's funny because when you say, well, we're actually not going to be sharing that, and we're not going to be sharing, we're going to kind of bubble up these pieces of feedback. So they're getting the real raw quotes, because I think that's really important, but we're not associating with them with a name or a position or something that's detailed enough that they could figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't say it better. Okay, so we're very much about the visuals, and so this is now something we just want to show you an example of an ecosystem sketch, which if you're talking about a digital workplace, is a really powerful and great way to convey a whole bunch of information. Like you can see here, it goes through the what of it, the where people are using things, how they're using them, and who is doing what. And I mean, we're lucky we have some very talented sketchy people here.
That sounds weird, the
I
way
know.
you said that.
Thank you. So we're able to produce things like this. Clearly, I'm not, but this was a project I was on, and our PM is very talented. I would say, though, you may be surprised. If you ask around within your team, you may be surprised by the people who do have some talent and who would love a chance to do some sketching and some illustration, and can do it quickly and produce something that's really compelling. And again, it allows you to tell a better story. And if you can tell an interesting and engaging and informative story of what is happening within your organization, it makes it so much easier to then envision a future. And it also makes it so much easier to get the buy-in that you need, because you're bringing people into what you've lived through that research phase, and it helps create an understanding and an empathy there that a report just can't do. All right, so now we're into the last and often the most fun part, which is envisioning the future. And so what we like to do there is create a manifesto for what your digital workplace experience is going to be, and then a roadmap. So let's talk a little bit more. So this is an example of a manifesto that I've anonymized to Acme Digital Workplace. And their bold statement was that their digital workplace exists to amplify, drive, and connect. And so this was their North Star. This is the statement that declares their vision and the kind of experience that they want to create with their digital workplace. And it's a really great way to get everyone on the team grounded and heading in the right direction. So we like using manifestos for that. Then roadmap. So here is a roadmap. You cannot obviously read this because it's
too small.
It's very small, and in fact, this is the PDF of a real cleaned up roadmap that is meant to be wall sized. So what we found is that we create these roadmaps, and our clients love getting them printed. Put them, if you have a war room or you have an area that the team mostly sits around, like they put this up and it becomes a living, breathing thing. So they don't always print them in color because they know that this is meant to be something that gets used and revised. So I'm just going to walk through the broad highlights of what this is made up of. So you've got a timeline across the top. It can be phases, it can be months, it can be whatever works for you, it can be quarters. You've got your experience manifesto on the left there, just so you're always grounded in the experience that you want to create. You've got these feature areas. Each column is a feature area. So in this case, it's about surfacing key communication, let's say. And then your rows, this is where the detail is. So you've got a description, you've got the value to the employee, and we often like to do this in the form of a quote to just, again, always be grounding ourselves in an empathetic lens. Then value to the business, and this will come out of your research. Then your success metrics, which are always so important to keep on top of, so you know if you're doing what you said you were going to do. And then the last bit is all just different success requirements, and these can vary, but you know, these are some pretty core things like to be successful, we're going to need content revisions and evolution. So what's our content process going to look like? What are the key communication activities? Who are the people and processes needed to support this? What kind of training are we going to need? And then sort of change management-y, like what are key adoption related requirements and activities? So a roadmap is very information dense. There is a lot of stuff in here, but it's very calming to know that it's all been collected and it is in one place, so that you can always see what the big picture is, but you can also then zoom in into the immediate sort of, well, what do we have coming up and right now, and prioritizing.
I really like value to the employee, because there's some digital workplace initiatives that when you really analyze it, or some features that are desired by the business, if there's no value to the employee, that's actually kind of a bit of a caution for you. And the value to the employee totally ties into the communication activities, how you talk about it, what you're doing. So I think it's something that I think a lot of roadmaps miss. Yep. They really focus on the business value, but I think you have to have both for something to be really successful.
Absolutely, and sometimes what we'll do with the value to the employee, we'll not only frame it as a quote, but we'll also talk about the size of the audience that this will impact, because it's always good to go into something knowing, okay, well, this executive portal is important to
10 people.
Yeah.
But they pay the bills, Kat.
Well, exactly. And that can make a difference. But it is good to always be thinking about, what is the stuff that's going to give us highest value, maximum impact,
Totally.
and have that somewhere. So value of the roadmap, it helps you prioritize clearly, obviously. It's great for stakeholder alignment because, again, people can see, everyone has their pet project. But a roadmap is a way for those individuals to see their stuff is coming. It's not happening now. If not, then when? And you can. It's a great way for greater team cohesion to have that kind of alignment, and it allows you to maintain the vision over time. The way roadmaps generally work out is you're going to have your first phase or time chunk bucket will be the most well understood and fleshed out, and as you work your way to the right of the roadmap, things will, by definition, get slightly less well defined because they're further out in the future and they're often dependent on the stuff that you need to do now. But overall, the vision of where you're trying to get to is maintained, is being communicated, and you can continue to just be refining and pushing yourself forward using something like a roadmap. Just if you're interested, some themes that have come up while we've been working on these roadmaps, just a sample of a few of them. So one is that an organization's culture puts a unique stamp on every roadmap. And so just because you see one organization's roadmap, don't think yours is going to look just like that. Well, you can copy it, just know that it might not be the right fit if you do that. Intranets are like an anchor in a vast landscape of confusing tools. So we've talked about intranets, we've talked about the digital workplace, and what we found in doing these roadmaps is intranets are always one of the most key, core, central initiatives, and it is that place that is becoming where people will go to in order to get the information for all the other tools in that.
The authoritative source.
Exactly, yep, so very important there. Another theme is related to that, how do we keep employees from being overwhelmed? How do we structure a digital workplace and a plan to roll that out and the tools within that are not going to overwhelm our people with just too much information? It is all about collaboration, innovation. It comes up over and over and over again. And that content also, as Ben mentioned, it's a constant challenge. It requires dedication and commitment and effort, but it really does pay huge dividends to pay attention to. In summary, because we have covered so much, I'm sure our audience is confused.
Bored. They're tired.
Okay. Anyways, so in summary, because we have covered a lot in today's session, spend time understanding your people and culture. It is probably the best grounding you will have moving into a technological project of any kind. Also, that the modern intranet project isn't monolithic. We talked about, back in the day, it was 12 months, 24 months to get to something that would just then sit there and look beautiful and slowly die. The modern intranet is, spin it up, start using it, start to see updates almost immediately, either through the technology or just what you're doing and how you're doing it, and that it's a steady state. It's got flow, and that's a wonderful thing. We also talked about the emergence of dashboards, which is this new experience for the employee, which is very much about them, what they need, how they want to work, what are the tools there at their fingertips. In a way that's never been possible before, but the technology has really taken us to that place now. And then lastly, that governance and roadmaps, they're not sexy, but they're probably one of the most essential tools that will help you reach that vision of where you're trying to get to with your digital workplace, and that they will help you truly power a new world of work. You like that? You like that?
Nice work.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our session today. Congratulations, you made it.
You survived.
We survived. So at this point, we would love if there's some
Question time.
questions. Yes, so please start to
Ask us a lot of questions.
ask us. We're ready. We want questions.